Hi, digital media students. This is Mr. Roper, and I'm here to walk you through our first project in our VectorArt series. We're going to be exploring a whole new way of creating digital media. Some of you may remember when we used Adobe Illustrator back in Part A of the course. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into using VectorArt tools. And if you've never heard that term vector before, or you're not sure what I'm talking about, don't worry, we're going to walk you through that too. For this project, we're going to switch from using Photopea or Photoshop to a vector art program called designer.gravit.io. And I've just visited the website here. It's a free online software that you can use. You can also add it to Chrome as a standalone app. And for you guys, you can use your Google School accounts to just create a new free account and use this as much as you'd like. I've already done that, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my Gravit account. And once you get it set up, what you're going to see is this welcome page that walks you through setting up your first project. So just like with Photoshop or Photopea, you want to decide what you're making your project for. We're going to be doing a print design here, so I'm going to select print, but you could be designing websites, you could be designing things for social media, for your cell phone, for t-shirts. Really, you have a lot of options here. So I'm going to go to the print settings, and I'm going to choose a piece of paper that is US letter size paper, 8.5 by 11, and I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Okay. Now inside Gravit, you'll notice this looks a lot like Adobe Illustrator. It's got some layer menus over here on the left side. It's got where it will list all of the layers that you're creating. Over on the right side, you have all your properties. So when you start changing things like color and outline and all of that kind of stuff, it's all going to show up over on this right-hand side. Along the top, you have all of your tools. So you can see things like your selection tool, your shape tools, your pen tool, which we're going to talk about today, and then text and so on and so on. And of course, all of your menus are up at the top as well, things like file, for when you want to save your design and edit and modify and all of that. So we'll get into that in just a few minutes. You can also use your keyboard shortcuts like Control plus to zoom in, Control minus to zoom out, Control 0 to go back to full screen. Okay, so let's start by taking a look at what we're going to make in this first project. We're going to be designing vector art versions of yourself as little characters. And I'm going to be basing mine off of the characters from South Park. These guys were originally created using cutout pieces of paper. They used construction paper, which you can kind of see in these images. Cut out all of the shapes for the head, the eyes, etc. And then they animated them by moving the pieces of paper around one frame at a time. Now, luckily with vector artwork, we don't need to do all that. We can create these really simple shapes in a program like Gravit and then do what we will with them from there. Before we get started, let's take a look at what we mean by vector. In all of the projects we've done so far, we've used what's called bitmap art. And bitmap art is when it's made up of pixels. You can see like this word here is created from using hundreds of little black squares to form the letter shapes here. And that looks great when you're working with digital photos, but the problem comes when you try to enlarge it or make it bigger or smaller for hats or t-shirts or TV or video. It's going to start to look pixelated. You're going to notice these pixelated edges around the outside. With vector art, we're not using pixels. We're actually creating art by connecting little anchor points and connecting those with lines that are all drawn using math. So it doesn't matter how big or small we create the artwork at. When we blow it up to giant size or shrink it down small, it's always going to be sharp because it doesn't have to use pixels. It's what we call resolution independent. So this is how we're going to be creating it. And I'm going to show you how you can make these anchor point shapes in our drawing program. Okay, so let me jump back over to Gravit, and I'm going to go full screen here, and I'm going to just create some simple shapes to make my character version of myself. For the head, I'm just going to use a simple circle shape. So I'll come over here to the shape tools, and I'll open it up and I'll choose ellipse, also the letter E on your keyboard, and I'll draw a circle. Now, if I just draw freehand, you can see that it's going to create an oval shape or an ellipse shape. If we want to create a perfect circle, that's where you're going to hold down the shift key, and you'll notice that that locks it into place here. Okay. Now, once I've got my circle drawn, it's going to fill it with an automatic color, and I can, of course, change that over here on my properties. So I'll go to fill. I want more of a skin tone here, so I can choose either a light pink, or if I want to get into some other skin tones, I can push it into the yellow and oranges, and I can get some different skin tones here, like tan. If I push it into the orange a little bit more, I can get more of a tan skin color. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now, I've got my head shape, so next thing I'm going to do is create some eyes, and those are also going to be circles. So I'll take ellipse tool, and you can make a decision here about whether you want to have round eyes or oval shape. I'm going to do oval shape for this. I'll create that. I'm going to fill it with pure white, and then I'm going to duplicate that shape just by holding down on the Alt key on my keyboard and dragging a copy over to the left. Okay, now you can see that Gravit is actually helping me do that by creating some guidelines to tell me where the center of the head is and where these different eyes should go. Okay, so I've got a pretty good start there already. Let me jump back over. I'm going to look at my South Park characters. You can see that their eyes are kind of rotated a little bit. They're not straight up and down. We're going to add some pupils here, and then we'll do the mouth and the rest. So let's try that. I'm going to come back into Gravit, and I'll take this eye, and to rotate it, I'm going to grab it by this little white handle and tilt it. Okay, just tilt it a little bit into the side to create those eyes. Okay, then let's go make the pupils. I'm going to come up to ellipse tool. One more time, I'm going to create a small circle here filled with black, and that will become the pupil of my eye. And then by holding down Alt, I can drag a copy of that pupil over and create the second eye. Okay, and so far I've got a pretty good shape. All right, now we need to get into drawing some shapes that aren't perfect circles or ellipses, and that's where we're going to use the pen tool. Okay, in the pen tool, I'm going to be posting a separate video on how this works specifically, but the basic concept is that it draws by connecting the dots. So the first time I click, it's going to create what's called an anchor point. Okay, and an anchor point is like a push pin. It just locks it into place, and wherever I move my mouse, it's creating this little stretchy line, and it shows me where it's going to connect the next anchor point. So if I move my mouse over to here and I click a second time, it's going to connect the two dots between the anchor points. Okay, now I want to curve it down to make kind of a smile shape. So what I'm going to do is drag my anchor point right here to about the middle, and instead of just clicking once, I'm going to click and hold. And while I'm holding down my finger, as I drag, you see it bends the curve. Okay, it bends a line between those 2 points. So I'll let go, and it's now connected it with a curve. And right away, it wants to start the next part of the curve. You know, it wants me to finish this up here. So I'm going to drag it over to the first anchor point again. You can see it gave me a little O next to my pen tool there, telling me that I'm about to complete the shape. And when I click, it has now created a solid shape. I'll grab my move tool here, and you can see that this is a white half circle with a black outline, and of course I can come over here and change that up over on this side. So why don't I go, let's give this a black fill, and I'm going to leave the black outline on it for now. Okay. If I zoom in a little bit, I can give this guy a tongue, and I'm going to do it with the pen tool. Take my pen, I'm going to start right here and click once, click and hold to bend the line. And just so I can see what I'm doing, why don't I go ahead and fill this in with a pink tongue color. There we go. Okay, let's try that again. Pen tool, and I want the fill to be pink. Oops. And if you make a mistake, it's just like with any other program, Control Z, you can go back a couple steps. I'm going to go back and start this over here again. And I'm going to bend this part of the tongue, and then I'm going to bend it back to that first anchor point right there. And let's see if that made my shape. No. All right, let's try this again. Maybe what I'll do is I'll draw it over here so you guys can see it. Take my pen tool, and I'm just going to draw a tongue shape, kind of like a soft, rounded M, and connect it back to the beginning like this. And then I'll come over here and I'll fill it with red for the tongue. Take my move tool. I'm going to move this shape down into the mouth just like that. Perfect. Okay, let's try that for the teeth too. I'm going to take my pen tool and I'll correct a straight line here. I'm going to curve it just a little bit on the end. I'm going to drag straight across, and then I'm going to drag it back to the beginning, and there will be my teeth, which I can move into place. Okay. Now, and another important thing with vector art is as you're drawing, it's creating one shape on top of another, and that's really important for keeping in mind how your shapes are stacked up. So, for example, the head is the first thing that I drew, so it's the bottom of the stack, right? Then on top of that, I drew the eyes. Then on top of that, I drew the pupils, then the mouth, then the tongue, then the teeth. So you want to keep the order in which you drew things in the back of your mind. If you ever need to move things around, there's a way you can do that. You can just click and say that you want to arrange the pieces, either send them to the front or send them to the back. Okay, so I can go through here now and decide what other pieces my character needs. I definitely need a little bit of hair here, so I'm going to use my pen tool for that, and I'm going to draw a little hairdo like this. I'll come back to this anchor point here and click it, and you see that that cut it off. Then I can drag it over here and bend it again. I'll click it to cut it off. I'm going to drag it up to here and bend it. It's almost like I'm drawing a wig on this guy. And then I'm going to drag it over here and bend it. And cut off the anchor point, then come back to the first one and bend it. Okay, and there's my hair shape. I can pick a color for this. I'll pick a little kind of light gray for me. And I'm building up my shape. Okay, so as I go through here, I'm going to be looking for where I can use either shape tools or the pen tool to create the rest of my body. For this next body part, I may just want to use like a rectangle tool, draw a little body behind him like this, and then I can go in and change the shape of this rectangle to make it look a little bit more realistic. So if I go to my sub-select arrow, this is the white arrow, I can grab just this bottom anchor point and pull on it to change the shape of that rectangle. Okay, so like for example, this little handle, if I turn it, is going to round off the body parts, and then I can round those off, and I'm going to send this backwards because I want it to be behind the head. So I'll right click on it and I'll say arrange, send to the back. And you see now it's moved it back behind the head. I'll change the fill color here to like a nice dark gray. And then I think what I'll do is use this same shape for the arms. So I'm going to hold down Alt and drag a copy of this over. I'm going to grab it from a corner and shrink it down to make a little arm. And I'll put that arm into place right here. And then I'll copy it again, Alt and drag, and I'll put another arm over on this side. Okay. If I want to add some skin to the arms, like these are just my shirt sleeves, I'll drag one down, and I'm going to change this one's color using the eyedropper to match my skin color. Okay. And I want this arm to be behind the sleeve, so I'm going to right click it, arrange, and send backwards. Okay. And you can see that it actually dropped it back behind that shirt sleeve. And what I can do is grab just these little anchor points down at the bottom, and I'll straighten that shirt sleeve back out. So now I've got a nice straight shirt sleeve here, but a rounded one up at the top corner. Okay, pretty cool. I can do the same thing for the other arm as well. Just drag this over, pop it into place. Let's say I want one of these arms to be waving. If I hold down Shift, I can grab both this and the shirt sleeve, and I can rotate them and then move them up into place like this. Okay. Then I can grab this one and rotate it and move it up into place where I want it to go to. Okay. For the hands, I'm just going to do another simple shape. We'll take an ellipse. I'm going to bold this out a little bit. I'll have it match my skin tone using the eyedropper. And depending on how comfortable you feel with the tools at this point, you may want to just start drawing in different fingers and stuff using the other shape tools. I can take a rectangle here. I'll make one finger. Let's have it match the skin tone. There we go. And then I'll use my sub-select tool. Let's see if I can zoom in here a little bit. Round these fingers off. I'll make some copies. So there's pointer finger, middle finger, next finger, and finally a little pinky finger. I'll take all of these guys together and rotate. Boop, 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 and boop. Okay. So experiment with this. See how realistic you can get building up these shapes. And as we go, we're going to add more and more detail to this, which I'll show you in an updated video later on of how you can add some even more finishing touches to this to make your character stand out, including their background. Okay? So I'm going to minimize this for a second, and hopefully that gets you guys on your way with your character design project for our first VectorArt project. See you soon.